Hey there, Kenneth French of Vast Voice, telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. We're very, very happy you stopped by. Either you're going to watch this or listen to this because you want to take your business to the next level. You're probably an entrepreneur who's either just starting out or you've been around for quite a while and you want to take your business to the next level. You're probably a real estate investor, maybe even a real estate agent, maybe a professional or of some sort, professional advisor of some sort. And well, you are stopping by because you need some valuable advice from one of the top industry leaders there is. Anyway, thank you very much. Once again, Kenneth French, Vast Voice, telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. Really glad you stopped by.
Are you going to die? Of course you're going to die. So you got to start thinking about estate planning. You're worried about taking care of your heirs and you want to do it in an efficient way, a very efficient way. Well, we're here to talk about that exact thing. Hey, my name is Kenneth French with vastsolutionsgroup.com. We just merged with a company called Asset Defense Team and Bob Bloom. And now we're going to help you because now we do tax, finance, artificial intelligence, and now also estate planning and asset protection. But specifically what we're going to be talking about today would be estate planning. I know it's a topic that, a lot of people like to put off. I put it off for years, seemingly. But now, now it's time to start thinking about it. You might be, just like the graying of America, that might be you. You might be a part of that graying of America and starting to think about it. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Once again, Kenneth French, vastsolutionsgroup.com. All right, I'm going to share my screen so you can see the presentation. Luckily, we're going to have some fun talking about something that, again, everyone seems to put off, but at the same time, they don't want to put it off and they want to get to it. And let's get right to it. So in this presentation is called Do Estate Planning Before It's Too Late. You know what I mean? Because, after the fact, it would be too late. So, so let's get to it before it is too late. Your estate plan, what is it? It describes your wishes of how your property should be, distributed at your death. And as I mentioned, it should be done in a tax efficient manner. You should be thinking about it tax wise. There are some ways specifically that you can lower the tax liability for your heirs if you're thinking about it beforehand, if you're attacking the process, the problem beforehand. First, who am I? Kenneth French. I'm an author, written 3 books. By the way, I have one more on the way. I'm a former Forbes.com small business contributor. I run vastsolutionsgroup.com, as I mentioned, and now, with the merger with Asset Defense Team, the resulting entity is vastassetdefense.com. Yep, I do a lot of speaking. I'm a frequent speaker all over the country, all over the world, actually, in some cases. And also, I'm old in that I've been around since 1994 in business. By the way, I live in Washington State, and I'm a Northwesterner. That's the way I look at it. 5 goals of estate planning. What are the goals of estate planning? It's important to really think about those as we attack the subject. You should have at least one of these as a goal if estate planning is going to really be a fit. And it really should be if your net worth is getting to the point where you got to start thinking strategically about your heirs and also the tax elements for your heirs. Number 1, eliminating the inevitable confusion. Without a will or estate plan, there's going to be confusion. There's probate. There's costs associated with it. You probably don't want to leave those costs to your heirs, and sometimes it could be very, very significant. Choosing the legal guardian, who will raise your children. That's important, especially depending on the circumstances. Ooh, there's an extra 2 there. I apologize. If you have kids at the younger ages, well, you can outline what are the specifics in your estate plan. Number 3, ensuring that your assets will be distributed as you want during your living years. That, I guess, is an obvious component of estate planning. Minimizing taxes, the major thing to think about when you're thinking about an estate plan, et cetera. Again, lowering your taxes legally, morally, and ethically. Everything we're going to be talking about here that we talk about at solutionsgroup.com, we talk about everything being moral and ethical and regulatory and abide by business mores. And when I speak about taxes, it's not as though we're looking to, curb the rules, do anything illicit. We're just trying to abide by the tax regulations and rules. And there's a lot of ways to lower tax liability as a result. And creating peace of mind before you die. And when you're in a plane and you're thinking about, it's starting to have some of that turbulence. Well, that's when you start thinking about this stuff. Is my stuff taken care of? So, well, do it before you get on that plane. Again, think about estate planning before you need it. Let's go over a little bit of the terms and terminology that would help you with estate planning. The state, all the property that you own, think about it. Everything that you own, that's part of your estate. It could be your car, it could be your business, it could be your mutual funds, your stocks, your bonds, whatever the case is. Real property includes the land and the structures on top of that land. It could be, as an example, your primary residence, or what we call a lifestyle asset. Beneficiary, the person who inherits the money or the assets or the goods. Beneficiary. Grantor, the person who's transferring the property to the beneficiary. And there's that'll come into play, and we'll be talking about that in just a little bit. Trustee, the party that handles the administration, the day-to-day administration of the will and distributing the property. That's someone who you can entrust to take care of things, someone who's responsible. And finally, probate. It's the legal process followed by the court system in your state, in every specific state, to determine the heirs and the planning and the distribution of the assets. So those are the key terms to know. And by the way, if you need any help, we're a click away. We're at vastsolutionsgroup.com. We're going to be talking about some of the added benefits some of our attorneys can provide to you as far as estate planning. And what I would say is, I mentioned Bob and, asset defense team. And now with that being the result of vastsolutionsgroup.com, and also now vast-asset-defense.com, where we've come together to help clients on a one-stop shop. And I just got a call from a client yesterday. He's brand new. He's like, I can't believe how things were disjointed before, now that he's been working with us, because everything's all in one spot. So, one-stop shopping. And it really makes a big difference when we're talking about, assets, when we're talking about estate planning. It all brings it together. And you'll see at the end of this presentation that there's going to be some added value bonuses. Let's talk about wills. It's got to meet a couple different components. You must be of sound body when you're doing the will. In most cases, you have to be 18. You must fully, you must be, you have to know the full extent of all your property, by the way. And many states require the signing of the will to be notarized. What are a couple other small little items or terms to know? The testator, the person who died and now therefore has a will at death. Executor, the person named by the testator to execute the will. And then finally, a guardian, the person named in the will or appointed by a judge to care for the minor children. And hopefully that isn't the case. That's not a consideration. The three things a will cannot do, because so many people think a will can take care of this, a will can take care of that. Well, you can't disinherit your spouse. Sometimes that you like to do that. You can't leave an excessive amount to charity. Really, that there's considerations in that regard. I mean, there's some ways to get around some rules by doing that. It's hard to define an excessive amount, but you call in the office, we can go over some specifics there. And then a will cannot avoid probate, because so many people say, oh, I'm just going to do a will, but it doesn't avoid probate. We defined what a probate was before, but a will does not get around that. People see exactly what you have when you have a will, meaning your creditors can see exactly what you have. So probate's not a good thing, generally speaking. A trust and properly formatted estate plan gets around that. I don't know about you, but upon my death, I don't want all my heirs, all my creditors knowing what my situation is. I want it properly packaged in a way that it should be. I'm going to give a special note here. We had a client die. He died and then he became a client. His estate became a client, in effect. Didn't have a will, didn't have, actually, it was a poorly formatted will. Didn't have an estate plan, sadly committed suicide, worth many, I don't know the exact amount, somewhere around $50 million. And man, his assets were all over the place. And he used to say to his brother, I don't want people knowing about where my assets are. He wasn't thinking about it, I'm sure, upon his death, but his assets were all over the place, unorganized. Everyone found out about it. If he would have had a simple estate plan, it would have been perfectly packaged, so the money would have been able to go to his kids. By the way, there was a fight. His ex-wife had a fight. His girlfriend had a fight. It was unbelievable. So anyway, a will usually can't do what a lot of people think they can. Although it's possible, you can put together a will without an attorney. You probably should not do it. You could do it if you're really cost effective. Go on the internet, do it. I bet you could do it for $200. But then again, is that the right thing to do? Yeah, Well, if there's no value provided by the attorney, then it might be the right thing. Most of our clients, most of the people who are going to be watching and hearing this are people who want to, they have I would say they're well heeled, they have a huge net worth. Let's say it's in the, $20 million range. Most of those, they put off putting an estate plan together, but at the same time, they know they have to. And usually they won't try to do it on their own. They won't go to an internet provider. Usually they will go to an estate planning attorney who's been around for a while. And at the same time, sometimes though, they won't update it. And that's a lot of what you need to do is update them really every 3 to 5 years. And what I would also say is you should be meeting with your estate planning attorney, your attorney on an annual basis. Really, after the year starts, that's when you should be meeting with your estate planning attorney or asset protection attorney, just to make sure that everything's taken care of on an ongoing basis, annual basis, because everything changes on an annual basis. You're probably going to, especially if you're well heeled, you're probably going to go out and buy another piece of real estate. You got to make sure that everything's properly tied up, and then reconstitute it or re-review in more detail the estate plan or the asset protection scheme overall. Let's go into trusts. And here, as you see it, it's an agreement that dictates how property will be held and managed for the benefit of someone else. So, 4 common trust classifications. We get a lot of questions about trusts, and sometimes, believe it or not, the classifications of them. Now, I'm going to make mention of something. At vastsolutionsgroup.com, a lot of our presentations that we're doing on our things called Vastcasts are basically a result of people calling into our office. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm responding to a bunch of questions that would come into our office with respect to trusts. Hence the reason now you see 4 common trust classifications. Revocable. They can be changed by the grantor, which we already defined, during their lifetime. Irrevocable, they can't be changed by the grantor once it's established. A living trust, it's a property that's transferred to a trustee while the grantor is living, therefore prior to decease, prior to death, and it can be taken back. It can be taken back by the grantor. Finally, you probably have heard of a testamentary trust. It's created by a will. I'm sorry. It's created by a will after the grantor dies. So, this is a good one. George S. Patton, a good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. So, in other words, get on it now. When you're flying the plane, as I mentioned, and there's some turbulence, it might be too late. And hopefully, by the way, that's not the case. Marital and non-marital trusts. Let's go into specifics. It could take 3 forms. A Q-tip, it provides for the surviving spouse during the lifetime. Number 1, a general power of appointment trust, or sometimes called a GPA, provides the most control to the surviving spouse. The spouse receives the income forever and controls what can happen to the investments over time, especially if there's no children. And then estate trust, it provides income to the surviving spouse. And non-marital trust, these are kind of hot topics right now. As they're called, credit shelter trusts or bypass trusts. Non-marital trusts can provide for your spouse and your children, but they're able to avoid estate taxes for your estate. So think about that. You probably like that fact that you can avoid estate taxes, because that's kind of that's the reason I say it's a big thing. You want to legally and morally and ethically avoid estate taxes to the extent possible. We'll skip down to the trust must exist for at least 3 years before the grantor's death. So, hey, if you're going to be flying, maybe do it now versus when you're flying, or then before that 3-year period, because you don't want that trust to be voided. And as long as a 3-year, rule has been met, the assets of the trust are excluded from the gross estate, i.e., shielded from taxes. Now, I think you're starting to get that there's some elements that you could do some tax efficient planning. Why not do it now versus later? And by the way, if you're a professional advisor, what I would say, by the way, go back to your professional advisor. If these are some of the things they're not thinking about, well, you can come to us, or you should do your research on the internet as an example. But these are things you should be at least thinking about. As I said, reconstitute every 3 years, 3 to 5 years, and then really truly take a look at it on an annual basis. Again, if your professional advisor doesn't know about this material, please reach out to us at vastsolutionsgroup.com. QDOT, qualified domestic trust, used when a spouse is a non-citizen. There's not that many people probably in this case who would require that, but I'm going to mention that. It allows a spouse to receive income for life, but they're unable to access the principal. And what I would say is this can get pretty technical. Once again, if you need any help on it, please, feel free to reach out. We're here for it. This is another hot topic. ILET, if you're very, very high net worth, in some cases this still makes sense. It's a unique circumstance. It's used for, as I mentioned, for wealthy, but it's funded. Basically, it's a life insurance. It's funded with life insurance policy, and it avoids estate taxes. We have some clients who are very well heeled, and this is something they're starting to think about more and more. And the trust owns and is the beneficiary of the policy, but the heirs are the beneficiary of the actual trust itself. Hence the reason it's called ILET. It's irrevocable. They are, by the way, expensive to set up, and sometimes the insurance can get complicated. You have to be of a certain health to be able to get the ILET insurance. Now, charitable trusts, used to be one of my specialties back in the day. I think it seems as though less people are, given to charity, in my opinion, than they used to. Maybe it's because of the economic climate, but I'm going to go over real quickly some charitable trusts. We just had 2 calls about charitable trusts not too long ago. So there's CRTs, charitable remainder trusts. It allows you to sell assets, highly appreciated assets, without having to pay capital gains, and you take income from it. Pretty unique in that regard. So that's one way of getting around a highly appreciated asset kind of after the fact and still getting income. And you can get the charity ends up with the asset. Charitable lead trust, or a CLT, trust that reduces the amount of the current taxable income, and you get to receive a federal tax deduction equal to the value of the annual trust payments that are actually made to charity, which is pretty nice. And going back to charitable elements, you have to think of the charity. Your number one priority must be to give to charity if you really think about it. And I would say you have to want to give to charity before it's a tax play. It really is for those who are charitably inclined. It really, really is. Now let's go over the tax in your state. Facts and things you really should know. Estate taxes are commonly referred to as the death tax. Okay. Inheritance tax is a state level tax, and it's not found in all states. Some states it's really expensive to die in. Some where that's not the case. State tax is federal. It's federal, and it's on the total estate. It's not technically a tax, but really is. But on those who are receiving the property from the estate, and let's talk about estate taxes. Anything about the estate tax exclusion, it's subject to federal taxes, and that's something to think about as well. Go over with your advisor. Let's go a little bit more into state taxes. How are they calculated? State taxes are taxed on their net value. And by the way, to find the net value, it starts with the gross value, and then gross value includes all your assets, and then it includes also the probate and the non-probatable assets. Now, let's talk about the items that are subtracted now. So we're talking about the gross, now the net. Funeral expenses, sometimes that could get higher than it used to be. Claims against the like unpaid taxes or credit card deals, or legal actions to the estate, and any expenses related to the administration of the state. Someone managing the state, they also get paid. So that's the gross, and then you have the net. Now, the role of life insurance, this is important. Life insurance can really be a heavy element and really help out as far as taxes. And it's usually in place in most estate plans because of the tax element, by the way. Well, plus it's also nice to be able to give something to your heirs that would be guaranteed. But, with modest estates, life insurance, it's not normally used in reducing taxes if it's a modest estate, but most of our plans usually aren't exactly modest. By the way, generally, as I mentioned here, funds received from a life insurance policy are not taxed, but that's not always the case. You have to talk to your life insurance professional about that. And by the way, we do have life insurance professionals in case you're in need of talking to someone about life insurance, because sometimes it really makes a big difference as to kind of how the plan's put together and also how it's taxed. Let's talk about the 2 different types of plans. In generally speaking, in estate plans, there's survivorship life insurance. So sometimes they call them second to die policies, two or more people, but only pays when the last covered person actually deceases. And then finally, the first to die is when the first person dies, and it doesn't take into account the second life. So those are generally the two types of life insurance as it relates to estate plans. So now to think about choosing beneficiaries for life insurance policies, it can be really tricky. Now, why do I say that? Well, who is it that you want to get the money, and how is it that you want them to get paid? Sometimes you want your kids, sometimes you want the kids of in a blended marriage. So it gets really complex as to how you go about taking care of the beneficiaries. And here you lack control over how the insurance money is spent because you've chosen, let's say, the wrong beneficiary in your circumstance. And using a trust as a beneficiary provides them more flexibility and protection from creditors. Because in some cases, the kids, let's say your beneficiaries might, I don't know, they might owe a lot of money, but if it's paid out in a trust, they get around it. And there's a lot of circumstances where that is the case. Health issues and other concerns. Now, a lot of times when people are obviously getting older, so they're having some health issues. So one of the considerations is to take care of the stuff before the health issues come about. You will have access to a lot more insurance, which again is a component of ILITs of trust in a lot of cases. So again, that makes even more important to start planning for estate planning early rather than later. I'm going to skip a few of these, but again, call in the office if you have any questions about the health elements, because again, what I would say is the sooner is much better than later, because man, I'll just tell you, do you want to optimize how much money goes to your heirs? Do you want to optimize how much money goes to your kids? Well, the answer probably is yes. But again, I know it's something to put off. Believe me, I know it's tough to talk about some of the stuff, but in the end, if you want to take care of your kids, one way of doing it, especially if you're a well-heeled individual, to do estate planning. By the way, I'm going to do a little bit of a break here. So, you stuck with us this long. I appreciate it. Us at vastsolutionsgroup.com. We appreciate it. A bunch of articles I've written over the years. One lady said it saved her $100,000. One of these elements in here that made me feel pretty good. There's elements to think about, which are covered in the book, Potential IRS Red Flags for Entrepreneurs, Essential Estate Planning Ideas. There's a number of estate planning ideas we go over on this. They've been, reviewed by an estate planning attorney. Bob, now with him on board, he'll be the one to he'll be one of the people who will be on board to help you as far as your estate plan. If you do need any help from us at vastsolutionsgroup.com, we have a team of asset protection attorneys, estate planning attorneys that put indeed a moat around your assets. And what is a moat, by the way, if you really think about it? How does it work? Back in the old days, they used to have water around castles, sometimes that have spikes coming in it. Well, for asset protection purposes, people would be afraid of that moat, right? Well, same thing with estate planning. If you have a properly put together moat around your assets, it's going to be harder for them to get at as far as creditors. That's one component for estate planning. But more than anything, it's really where you're thinking about taking care of your heirs and doing it on a tax efficient basis, and do it now rather than later. We are giving a half an hour consultation away for estate planning, for your estate planning needs. What you're going to do is you're going to fill out a form. So we're going to be able to provide some input for a half an hour. We're going to give 30 minutes free of a consultation, so you can see what we do. We can see your situation. Who knows? Maybe we'll work together down the road. I'd be shocked if after that 30-minute consultation, working with Bob, working with Charles, with other people in our shop, if you're not one to work with us. And by the way, we also do teach estate planning attorneys some other specifics for estate planning, because estate planning is always changing. We're always trying to better the industry, so we work with a lot of estate planning attorneys. So what I would say is we really appreciate you taking the time to work with us, to listen to this, because you're busy. You could be doing a lot of things, and you've decided to spend the time here with us today. Email us, and the same thing with the 30-minute consultation with Bob at info@vastsolutionsgroup.com. It's been a pleasure.